Hi, welcome to another episode of Unlocking Medicare. I'm your host, Tyrone Carr. Today we have another great guest. I'm excited to hear from Fire Chief Michael O'Brien. So thank you for coming in this morning and
thanks for having me
with us. So we here at Tyrone Carr Associates, we always provide just additional content outside of not just Medicare, but helping our clients and just other listeners outside of TC and Associates, just provide value that may help them as far as just everyday life. And so this was a topic that we felt like would be really helpful to the senior community. So, if you could help us, and I'll get to some questions that some of our clients sent in. So what would you say would be the biggest thing that seniors could look out for as far as just everyday life and helping them as far as just being safe in the home?
There's no doubt probably with seniors, we see a lot of medical emergencies, and a lot of times even they're preventable. But sometimes accidents happen and others. And as we age, I think there's times we forget there's certain things we should be doing, maybe a little slower. Maybe we're not as agile as we used to. So simple things like slips, trips, and falls. We start to see a lot of medical emergencies that our crews are responding in that environment. So things like loose carpet, things in the garage out of place become more important now than ever, especially as people age. When we look at fire safety, it depends on where our humans are living and how they're living. So when we start to see a lot of our fire events and smoke investigations, more of a fire non-medical based, it's really starting to spend some time in those preventable incidents. So as we age and we stay in place, a lot of times our homes age. So our systems in our homes get a little bit older and more taxed as well. So just, you think through just general fire safety, right? Have we cleaned our furnace and have we had a reputable company out to service it? Are we staying on top of our chimney and cleaning, those types of systems, all the way down to how we use our grill and whether or not it's been properly maintained. But many of the times we see a lot with our seniors is just making sure they're taking that time or having somebody work with them to keep those things running smooth.
Okay. So is there one, just sort of your experience being with the Brighton Fire Department that you've seen was the number one reason for, a fire taking place? I mean, obviously we know we have questions to get to, but that's your number one as far as the top 5 reasons for a fire, or
number one is almost always cooking at this point in time, especially with that age demographic. So it could be, there's a lot of things that can happen in a cooking related. It could just be, most of the time I don't want to say the term carelessness, we get distracted, right? Even in our age group, we can get distracted. And so truly finding methods that will help you be fire safe in the cooking arena. So when I say it's cooking, it's not usually the fryer type fires. It's cooking left unattended, and we get distracted. And so if you really look at the population in general, we get a lot of a pot left, it overboils, and we're out of the room, we're out in the yard, and we forgot that we started something. And so setting a timer on your phone, on your watch, however you choose to do it, that will alert you. Even though you're I'm pretty good, I don't need a timer on this. Sometimes just setting that timer, if we get pulled away, right? It used to be we'd get pulled away because of kids, right? And even as we age up, we just get pulled away from distractions that pop up. And so that's something that we're always trying to work to educate people. And one of the simplest ones that we've always said is set a timer. Just set a timer that you have to respond to. That way, if you do get distracted or you forgot, it's going to be a general reminder.
Do you guys get into specifics, with a specific individual, an age where you're seeing, if it's health related? So let's say after you guys would really dive deeper into the investigation of, okay, yes, this person left it unattended. Was it then determined there would maybe some medical issue there, whether it be someone, let's say, who recently had a stroke or Alzheimer's, dementia? So I guess for people that watch the video that are kids and say now that their parent is fighting with them to get additional help in the home, or maybe it's time to transition to a nursing home or assisted living facility. Do you guys get into that specific kind of background in the investigation?
We're always monitoring like our incident data, and we look for repeat addresses. And one of the aspects that we do at Brighton Fire and a lot of our fire departments to do is really to reduce our overall risk. So we like to be preventative, and when we start to see duplicate incidents, especially if they cross over from medical into a fire, right? So we've had maybe contact at our address or contact with people, and we have that contact from a medical, and then it goes into a fire event. That's a pretty good indicator for us, where we try to be a little proactive to see. Now, in the case of aging up families, probably one of the hardest things we ever have to deal with as an organization is when we start to see that, when we see whether it's dementia, Alzheimer's, just somebody aging out. That's a very difficult process, and we have had to be engaged both with families, caregivers, but we really try to, right, we want people to live in their home safe as possible and as long. And so, you know, even in those cases, there's a lot of things that we do. Just, you think of the basics, and so many times you just have to start with the basics. And there's changes that families can make with like cooking equipment that automatically times out. Now, we're going to hate cooking on that equipment, but if you can start to build in some engineering practices, but you know, the simplest engineering practice is working smoke alarms. And so a lot of times, maybe if that family structure support isn't there, we're seeing a lot of where just the smoke alarms aren't working, carbon monoxide isn't working in the home. And so we'll spend a lot of energy just trying to help those people make sure they have a good, safe living environment.
So that leads into the first question that was sent in from our client, Jerry. How often should an individual change the batteries in their smoke detector?
Yeah, so most people grew up, right, change clocks, change batteries, and the question is which one? And so modern smoke alarms nowadays are really in two categories. Once a year, so pick daylight savings time, usually pick the fall, it's right around fire prevention, great time to test, right? So we want people to test their smoke alarms, smoke carbon monoxide alarms every month, just push the button, make sure they work. Now, for some people, that might mean using a broomstick to be able to touch it so that we're not climbing ladders. But, you know, there's a lot of smoke alarms nowadays. It's a completely new technology where you really don't have to do anything with them short of test them. They have what's deemed long life batteries, so they're about 10 years. And so that's been a lot of our smoke alarms that we've been putting in with homeowners, or we've been putting in with, if anybody requests, is we use long life nowadays. And so it's really convenient. You don't have to go looking for batteries. You don't have to buy batteries. They last for about 10 years. They'll hit an end of life and you just replace the unit.
Is there a specific brand as a fire department that you guys would recommend?
So depending on what your house is and your makeup, most of our homes nowadays have what's called hardwired with a battery backup. So the building's power powers the device on a normal basis, and then if the building loses power, the backup comes in the battery. So most of the manufacturers, both Kidde, First Alert, Gentex, there's a lot of great providers. What we really try to implore people is find the right detector for the space. And what I mean by that is you'll look at, if you go to any of the major big box, there's a difference in technology, and we want them to make sure that they're putting the right detector in the right space. So they use common language. They'll say bedroom, kitchen, wherever. And then we've really been pushing these long life so people don't have to worry about replacing those batteries. Yeah.
I know that was the previous homes that we had. It was, you know, one goes off, you change the battery, then it's like a few weeks later. It always seems like the middle of the night. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. You're like, and then you're walking around the house trying to find out which one is it. Yeah. It's like, no, now you just learn to just change them all at once, you know, just, you know, to deal with that. So, going to the next question from Tim, how do I properly dispose of flammable chemicals, paint, spray cans? I certainly have some, and I'm always like, well, I don't want to just throw them in the trash because I don't necessarily want that going into like a landfill, but so when this came in, I'm like, that's a great question.
Yeah, a lot of communities have different resources. So if, right, in Brighton Township, as well as most of our communities in Livingston County, they have hazardous waste days where you can drop off a lot of those products. But we all have like gallons of half-used paint. And a lot of times what I tell people is open them up, put some kitty litter in it, let it dry out. Right, so keep it out of the reach of animals, pets, But if you usually pop that lid, put some kitty litter or sand in it, it's going to dry out, and then you can just dispose of it. Now, in the flammable category, the motor oil, those things sitting in your garage, you know, a lot of, if you can't find the hazardous waste days that work for you, look at your county environmental stuff. There's a lot of resources where there's drop off, or believe it or not, like Pep Boys and O'Reilly's, a lot of times they'll take some of those automotive based chemicals back and they will recycle. So all depends on where they're at, but like, definitely never down the drain. Definitely don't just put it in the trash truck, because every trash truck compacts something, and there's a good way to start catching stuff on fire, and that's compacting flammable liquids.
So what does the cat litter do, or the dirt with like paint?
Just dries it out. So it just becomes a very hard material.
Okay.
It won't be liquid anymore.
Now, is that
dries it out.
bad for, like, if you just throw that then in the trash can, is it then bad as far as?
I mean, you know, it's going to go into a landfill most likely. Most of it is just, as long as it's in that latex, that paint category, it's just like any other paint cleanup.
Okay.
But if you can get to one of your hazardous waste days, that's number one usually. That's
So I live in Brighton.
Yeah.
Is that what's?
Yeah. So Brighton Township's clerk, I think they just did their hazardous waste, but they happen about twice a year.
Okay.
So it'll be their large item pickup and hazardous waste. There's typically something, both Livingston, Oakland, Wayne, and pretty much most of the United States, their counties are going to do some kind of hazardous waste pickup, cleanup. So you would take the product and they would sort and get it to recycling.
That's great. That's a great tip. I didn't know that. So do you see when it comes to like a stove as individuals age, would you recommend like I mean, I don't, this may is just getting out in the weeds as far as so specific, but that you would suggest like electric stove versus a gas? I mean, again, is there data showing statistically like what would be better?
You know, gas versus electric, there are some added safety that can be put in on electric that gas you cannot. And so there's a lot of aftermarket as well as certain stoves you can purchase in which the heating element will time out after so much time. And so if you're having or concerned about a lot of the issues related to like stovetop cooking, just know that we can engineer out some of the problems. So you can't get above a certain temperature, you can't be on for so long. You know, if you're an avid chef, it would drive you absolutely nuts. But we've implemented a lot of these in dormitories and care facilities. A lot of our assisted living facilities will have that kind of stovetop where it just times out. It's a limit to 30 minutes. It only allows it to get so hot, and it keeps us out of hitting those higher temperatures.
So another question. We have an old wood burning stove in our home that we use a few times during the winter. We have never had it inspected. Is this something that a fire department would help us with?
Yeah, so we don't do inspections on those, but there's lots of, believe it or not, there's still chimney sweeps that exist, and people that, whether it's a old wood stove or whether it's a chimney, they should be cleaned and swept every year. If you're using them both from a gas perspective, you might have a little bit more time frame, and there's some wonderful providers in just about every region, but believe it or not, there's still chimney sweeps that get into those, and we do a lot of work on chimney fires that spread into attics, believe it or not. So they just get old and cracked, and when the smoke has nowhere to go, or the fire starts to go out, and easily prevented by getting them cleaned.
Now, so is that, you guys just don't do them for a wood burning stove, or just
in general, we don't do chimney inspections, but we end up there if there's a problem. So finding the right chimney sweep and getting them maintained. We've seen, there's one that comes right to mind is the family had they moved a gentleman out of his house, and they were cleaning up the house, and they lit a fire, because that's what they were used to. The house was damp, it was cold, they lit a fire. Well, that fireplace we had found out hadn't been used in 10, 15 years, and it was completely clogged. So as soon as they started the fire, it caught everything in the chimney on fire. And so just be careful, right? As as you use chimneys and fireplaces, It's a hard thing for a lot of us, is just finding the right contractor to go do some of that work, but there's some pretty reputable folks that are doing a lot of those.
Do you find wood burning stoves versus like a gas stove, like one is more dangerous than the other?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I don't know if they're more dangerous, but definitely wood needs more care, right? So we can have issues with gas fireplace, especially ones that maybe you still have to use a lighter to light it, or it doesn't have a pilot. But when you look at like a wood burning, that buildup of creosote, that buildup of materials in that liner is really where we start to have issues.
Okay. I know I need to have mine checked out. I have a gas stove, but I did notice I just had the house painted, and the outside of it there was some black around the vents or whatever.
Sure.
So I don't know if it's like a bird's nest or whatever.
Could be. Yeah.
In there,
it's funny how those birds.
Yeah. They find some the places, it's interesting. But okay, so I am 70. I live with my spouse. We both use a walker. What is the best evaluation plan I can have in case of a fire?
If you have limited mobility with a walker or not, just fire's extremely fast. And that's the part that we have to keep reminding everybody, is what you see on TV is not what's in reality. It's dark, it's fast. So, just general fire safety, let's start with working smoke alarms so that if there's a fire event, you can respond quickly. If you're starting to get hard of hearing, there actually are devices that we can change the tone of the smoke alarm into a better frequency. And so as we all kind of age and have hearing loss, there's actually better frequencies. And then if you have full hearing loss, adding in like bed shakers where it shakes the bed. So smoke alarms are always number one. Number two, door close and open, right? Sleeping with doors closed gives you added security. Especially if you start to think that as smoke travels, it's fuel. And so if we can limit that, it's going to help us out. And then really just making sure you've got nice and open ways to travel. It's amazing the stuff some of us can collect, right? We could say the worst side is hoarding, right? And I think when you hear that term, a lot of people understand what that can look like. But most of us, at times, we leave things that are going to obstruct our way to get out in the sense of an emergency. So keeping those pathways open so nothing falls and tips over, and just reacting when you have that alarm to getting outside and making the calls once you get outside.
Would it be in the best interest of like the homeowner that is a specific age, maybe they have some health issues, for them to contact their local fire department just to make them aware of like, hey, this is who I am, maybe introduce myself, this is some ailments I have, I'm in a walker. I don't know if that would be beneficial.
Yeah. It's a hard, we have the ability to flag certain locations, but the hardest part with so much of that for most of the fire service, our software isn't that sophisticated. And so if that human moves out and we don't close that, it always kind of is attached to that residence. So what I would say is if people have concerns, reach out to their fire department, see if they do home safety checks. At least that relationship can start to be built. So if somebody calls us, right, we're going to come out and check their smoke alarms, we're going to check their house. We're going to give them some tips and tricks, especially as they're aging up or not. If they're aging up, it's a great opportunity for us to come in and interact.
So this is a question. What are common fire hazards that seniors should be aware of in their homes, and what steps can they take to mitigate these risks?
Yeah, so, I think we all know the basics, right? Don't run your dryer, don't run your dishwasher when you're not home. Those are pretty simple things. And if we probably walk all the way through, we talked about smoke alarms. So then, hey, do you have a fire extinguisher handy? And most of us have a fire extinguisher. It's underneath our sink and it's way in the back. And we see it all the time when we respond to fire incidents where all the stuff that was in the front is now on the floor. Because people are trying to get to their fire extinguisher. Simple tips and tricks. We talked about the cleaning up of your chimneys, but we have to do the same. This is a great thing for your grandson, granddaughter to come over, pull that dryer out and get that lint trap cleaned out. So when we're using our dryer, that's probably up near the top of our incident responses, our fires in non-maintained dryer, right? That ductwork that nobody wants to have cleaned that goes outside is very combustible and a big source. Probably the most modern day fire incident we're having is dealing with lithium ion batteries, right? So if we take smoking out of the picture and we're cautious on our smoking behaviors if we do smoke, but Charging of things in people's homes is becoming a huge fire problem for us. It could be something like a cordless drill. It could be your cordless vacuum. It could be your laptop. It could be a plugged-in wheelchair. And so if it's something that's mobility-based, buying products that are listed is a huge thing. So if you're in the market for a wheelchair, if you're in the market for, you buy a battery bike because you still want to stay active, but you're going to buy a pedal assist, it's buying products that are UL listed. So it would bear a UL stamp, right? I think we're all used to looking at a light bulb, and that light bulb has a UL listing. Believe it or not, in the wheelchair market, powered mobility, all the way to e-bikes, there's a lot on the market that aren't listed. And what we're seeing is bad batteries, bad charging equates to fires. And they're very, very fast, very, if there's a fire event, you almost can't escape. They're that fast. And so developing our charging techniques is becoming something we have to keep talking about. So let's say you're a handy person and you like to have your DeWalt drill and your Makita drills charging all the time. It's not good for the battery health. But when you look at anything battery related, if you're seeing swelling of the battery, you don't have the right charger, the charger's broken, or you just buy aftermarket batteries, those are all high indicators of creating a battery incident that creates a battery fire. So that's probably the big one, is just using the right charger for the right piece of equipment. So a great example for most people that probably makes sense. If you take your iPad charger and plug it into your iPhone, it will charge immensely fast because it's not the correct power going into that device. Even though the connector's right, it's not the same. Well, what do you do if you lose your charging piece of equipment? I'm sure you have a drawer in your house that's filled with a bunch of cables, and you just look for the right end to fit into the product. That's not always what's supposed to happen, because there's actually those connectors that go on the wall will put different forms of energy into that cable, into the battery. And so battery fires are fastly becoming every fire department's #1 cause of fire. And it's usually the wrong charger, the wrong battery, or a damaged battery. And damage can happen a couple different ways. And the simplest could be, let's say our kids leave, they have an electric scooter and they left it behind the car and we just ran it over. And the battery doesn't show anything, it's not smoking, and nobody says anything, and it just goes back into the garage and gets plugged into its charger. That's a great indicator that probably somewhere down the road it's going to have a fire event. So if we do have issues where we drop maybe a battery from more than 10 feet, or we run something over, instead of plugging it in, is keeping it outside the home that way and getting it to some kind of recycling, it's most likely damaged. If you ever cause trauma to a battery pack like that, you're going to end up with a fire event somewhere down the road.
Is it true, and I've only heard this, that whether it be an automobile or if it be, some type of lithium battery for a power tool, that there's no way from your standpoint to be able to distinguish that or extinguish that fire? You just let it burn?
Yeah, so when the battery goes into what's called a thermal runaway event, it off-gases this very flammable gas, and it creates this three-dimensional fire that we have no tools to stop it. So really the only way to, if you look at the makeup, if I pause for a second, if you look up the makeup from a tool to a car, it's a bunch of batteries in a container. So we think of a battery like a AA or a D cell. They're a little bit different chemistry inside, but they're basically a bunch of those. And so when you get a thermal event, you get one and then you'll get another. So you'll hear popping, or you'll hear other sounds come off, and it's kind of a cascading event inside of the container. And so the best that we can do is cool to hopefully not get the other cells to catch. But typically in a mobility space setting, the event is done before we get there, because it happens very fast, very quickly. And so this is where we're trying to tell a lot of people, right? I think most people have learned not to run their dryer when they're not home. Sometimes we all do, we want to run the dryer. Maybe it's just my house because of who I am, but right, not running your dryer when you're there is a great general fire safety. The same would happen with battery charging. Don't leave your stuff actively charging when you're not there, because the events are so fast. And it's incredible how fast some of these events are.
Would you suggest, or does it matter, like if you were to have, let's say, power tools, or now you're getting to, maintenance tools for like your lawn that can be powered. Is there some type of box where you can have it all isolated in one area, charging area? So if it does catch fire, like you had some type of container that would contain that fire so that way it doesn't spread into the home, since, like you said, it happens so fast that there's no way of you, let's say, getting out of the home, but is there a way to isolate that fire in some type of specific...
Believe it or not, they exist, but most of us can't afford them. They're more intended for a commercial setting than they are for us as general users. What I would say is buy listed equipment. If you feel like it got wet or damaged, don't actively charge it. And then really just going down the road, just make sure you're only charging when you're there.
Okay.
But yeah.
And the last question we have, in case of a fire emergency, what evacuation tips and strategies do you recommend specifically for seniors, especially those that mobility issues or disabilities? I guess we kind of addressed that.
And believe it or not, it's still going to go back to what all of us probably learned back, 30 to 50, 60 years ago. Smoke goes up, right? And moving quickly to when you hear that alarm, and then don't be afraid to crawl. Because we need to get outside the structure. And if you actually are having a fire event and there's smoke, moving quickly towards the door is a great way. And if you're really severely, let's say you're a human who has to park their wheelchair or their mobility device right next to them, and then they go to sleep in the bed, make sure you're sleeping with your door closed. And if there is an event, the best thing might be is just when you make a 911 phone call is to alert us where you're at so that the crews can go make that rescue to that room.
So let's just say in the event of a fire, you are someone who does rely on a wheelchair and you're not as quick to be able to respond physically to a fire. Would you say if a person hasn't moved into an assisted living nursing home and now they're trying to do everything in their power, their abilities to maintain, staying in the comfort of their own home, would you do something different to, let's say, that bedroom? So if there was a fire, is there a way of structurally doing something differently? Or would you recommend, hey, stick a extinguisher next to the bed?
It's such a hard one because there is technically an answer, but most of our homes aren't equipped with home fire sprinklers, right? So the answer that we tell a lot of people is just build your home with sprinklers, but we're in homes that don't have those. So we really have to rely on the fastest way to be alerted to a fire is great smoke alarms. And then really it's closing that door. So many of us probably sleep with our doors open. And it's just, as you go to bed at night, close those doors. So if there is a fire event, it's hopefully behind a door and it's kept small. That's really one aspect. But if you're in that mobility space, what we really try to tell people is you've got to react to that smoke alarm fast and then start moving and getting out. And if you hit a point, right, think of all those things we've learned through school, through good fire prevention. If the door's hot, don't open the door, right? Get to the window. And if you can alert us that you're in that room, whether it's via a cell phone call, whether it's by putting a sheet out the window or a t-shirt and closing the door or the window on it, we're going to be alerted as soon as we get there. But if you're really stuck in that mobility space, we can work to keep fire small by closing doors and being alerted quick by smoke alarms.
Okay. And the actual last question, are there any resources available for seniors to receive for safety education, smoke detector support to make their homes more fire resistant?
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll probably give you some links that you can put in the show notes and everybody can have them there, and that'll take them to, we got some videos for tips and tricks for home fire safety, because there's a lot of great tips and tricks that we all just need some fine tuning on, from cooking all the way to just some general safety. And now we're evolving into this battery thing as well. So, it's funny that if you take a couple minutes to practice fire safety at home, it's like anything else. If you just pause, look at your home from a new viewpoint, because right? We go in and out of our houses all day, and our crews, the fire department, we live fires every day, right? So we see how devastating it can be, but most people don't think that that could happen to them. And so whether it's change your clocks, change your batteries, which means, hey, I should check my smoke alarms, all the way to having that conversation with your partner, having that conversation with your family. Hey, are my smoke alarms working, right? Just do a mini checklist, right? Have we had our equipment serviced? Do I need to have work done on our fireplace? How are we doing? Has the vent been cleaned out lately? And you know what? Create a list. That's why you have grandkids. Right? This is why you have young, you have sons and daughters and people that are part of your family. Write a list, have them help you out, because what a better way, and if you think you need your smoke alarms replaced and you live in Brighton, Genoa, call us. This is what we do. We come out, we take a look, and at least we can tell you what's best.
So that is true. Like you guys, what I do recall was that if they contact you, you guys will come and change the smoke detectors for them and stuff
Absolutely.
like that. Okay.
Yeah. We spend a lot of time, right? Fire safety happens in homes, and that's probably where they can be the most fatal for us versus a commercial business like this. We don't have the fire events here like we do where people sleep. And so we spend a lot of energy. If somebody can call us, from a chirping smoke alarm all the way to, hey, I don't know if anybody's looked at my smoke alarms. I can't get on the ladder to check them anymore. Can you guys come do that? That's what we do, because we want to make sure people are safe in their home and have that fighting chance if there is a fire event.
So the last question I have for you, if you were to give one tip to, kids or grandkids, our age, that you would tell them to do or look out for their parents or their grandparents, what would be the number one tip that you would suggest?
As our parents age up, it can be very tough conversations. And I think so many times we think of the driving, right? And we think of maybe that medical emergency. What I would say is take time with your family members just to start with the basics. And when I say start with the basics, do we really know mom and dad's medical history, and is it written down? And think of it now at 2:00 in the morning where you called 911 because you hadn't been able to reach your parents, and they're doing a welfare check. So if our paramedics and our EMTs show up, can they quickly find mom and dad's medical information? And if you think about all that kind of very simple planning, we call it like File of Life. You've probably seen them on fridges. Our crews look for that stuff on people's fridge every day. What meds are they on? What medical history do they have? But if you think about that planning, what a great time before there's an event to just start doing that. What is going to be our cycle with mom and dad as it relates with fire safety? Because I think so many times we want to tackle or have to tackle the real hard stuff, but as kids, and we want to give the best life for our parents, they tend to think through like the will, and they tend to think through those things. That's a great opportunity for us just to make sure, hey, are we up to date on everything that mom and dad might experience, both from medicals all the way to fire safety? And if you want, number one thing for us is always smoke alarms. I can't tell you how many homes we go into that they're not working. And I don't think it's intentional that people make them not working, and some of us have parents that haven't touched their smoke alarms in 25 years. And they're probably not going to work. And so it's a simple fix that we all can do and work to help them out. But have those conversations early and start talking to mom and dad about fire safety and just new practices. Who would have ever thought that you'd have to relearn how to cook? You've been cooking for 50, 60, 80 years. And sometimes you got to teach that new trick, just as simple as, hey, mom, here's how you can talk to your phone, and they'll remind you that you're cooking.
Do you guys have a percentage of people that you guys can correlate to deaths where their smoke alarms are up to date, active, they have batteries, versus those that unfortunately were taken due to a house fire that didn't have active working smoke alarms?
A very high percentage, and it's probably plus 80% of people who die in home fires don't have working smoke alarms.
Wow.
And all the time, and we can judge it as firefighters in a sense when we respond to whether it's a smoke investigation all the way to an active fire. Any of those incidents, it's amazing how many times we don't hear the beeping when our crews are going in and out of the structure, right? We'll hear the beeping as we're pulling up. We'll we can observe it, be a part of it when we're in the structure, and all the time. And I can think of multiple fatal fires here within Livingston County, within the Brighton area, where people have died in the homes and there was no working smoke alarm. So Brighton Fire is probably in the top 3 in the state of Michigan for how many smoke alarms we've installed. We take it 100% serious that our job is to get out of the fire station, get into people's homes, and help them there. Because if we can, and in fact, we just got another grant for about $60,000 in smoke alarms, where we're going to buy product and it gives our firefighters tools when they help people out in their homes. And we, believe it or not, we even look on medical runs. If we're at your house for a medical run, I guarantee you our staff's looking at your smoke alarms. And they're looking for obvious signs that they're not working, that they need to be replaced. And if we can't do it after we're done providing medical care, they will probably schedule a crew to come back out and take a look when it's more convenient. And just because we truly believe in the power of them.
Well, I mean, not to plug Brighton, because I love living in Brighton, just for many different reasons. But I mean, one other, asset or one perspective to look at, well, your top 3 in the state as far as installing just so if you have someone who's, considering relocation, I think that would be something to take in consideration. So,
we want our people safe at home.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate having you today. I mean, I've learned a lot and more than I anticipated. So I appreciate you coming in, Fire Chief O'Brien. So thank you again. And again, thank you for our listeners and the people who have subscribed to our channel. Again, we thank Fire Chief Michael O'Brien for coming in for an interview, and stay tuned for our next episode. Thank you.